In this world of high speed communication, networking, and friending, have you ever found yourself feeling lonely and a little outside of it all? Well, the author that I'm introducing you to today has written a very important book that addresses just those feelings. Jerry Nehr is a published author, keynote speaker, educator, and licensed professional counselor. He has spent the last 25 years serving individuals who have severe and persistent mental illness, addictions, and homelessness, people who are unable to take care of themselves. His daily work consists of listening to the stories of those he refers to as outside the margins and helping them walk back into healthier ways of living. Jerry's book, Erasing the Margins, aims to enhance our awareness of these individuals and to realize we all find ourselves outside the margins from time to time. Jerry, thank you so much for coming on Triumph Talks. I'm really excited to share you and your book and all of your ideas with the viewers.
Melanie, thank you very much. I really appreciate being here. This is really cool. So I'm looking forward to whatever we do here today. It's a real treat, and thank you. I really appreciate it.
Your book is actually a collection of essays that you've written that all have the theme of feeling lonely or a little outside of the margins. And it's very moving to read, but it's also funny. You have a lot of very witty thoughts that go along with it. And so I'm really looking forward to sharing some of that. But I want to begin with the first question that I ask all of the authors that come on this show. And that is, what has inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, thank you. Well, there's been a few things, Melanie. In 2007, my dad died, and I began to write. Now, I had been writing for a long time since I was a kid, but I really began to write a lot, and I started writing. I started writing these essays, so my emotions were pretty raw. I was 41 years old at the time, and he passed away. He was 68, which the older I get, the younger that is. And I just wrote my way through my healing, or tried to write my way through my healing. So I began to write these essays, some of which I thought were kind of good, and other ones which were not good at all. But I began to write, and the more I wrote, the more I began to look at my life and how lucky I've been, in many ways, which we won't go into this interview, but just my thinking of, there are those of us who I call, and the name of the book is called Erasing the Margins, of course, but who are within the margins of life. In other words, they have daily opportunities to succeed. They have enough food and a place to live, and they have enough of their mental health, and health in general, to take care of themselves. And I started thinking about the people who I've worked with for a long time, and I know we'll get into that in this interview here, but the people I've worked with who have been compromised in so many ways. So my father's death was like this springboard into me, beginning to think about, what am I here for, and how can I take what I have, these blessings, and maybe try to help somebody else out who doesn't have them. And then one of the essays I wrote was about one of my college professors, and boy, I don't even know, he was old back in the day, and his name was Dr. Arnold Colvin, and he taught a psychology course,
Mhm.
and he had this class. It was group therapy, and I'll be real quick about it. But one of the things he would say, because kids, young adults, whatever, we would come into his class, and sometimes we would be late. All right, and he never gave us the business about that. All he would say is, because he ran the group in a circle, like a group therapy circle. So everybody was in a circle, including him. And I know I came in late a couple of times, he would always say, widen the circle and let them in.
Mm,
Right? Widen the
yeah.
circle and let them in. And I use that as a metaphor, as as a symbol for one of the essays I wrote about, how do we widen the circle, Another
Yeah.
way to say this, how do we erase the margins? But in essence, the meaning is, how do we get people who are compromised and who are kind of operating outside the basic necessities of life? What can we do to bring them in? So that was a one of the reasons I began to write the book. And
Yeah.
I would say the last one, or one of the main ones, was that I I wasn't thinking, gosh, I'm going to write a book and I'm going to make a whole lot of money. That never entered my mind.
Yeah.
But what did enter my mind was, what can I put in writing? And thanks to you and what you've helped me with in publishing it, I now have something that I can leave my son. He's my only child. He's 22. His name is Quinn.
Well, I know that the story that you shared with the professor is actually in your prologue,
Yeah.
and the prologue is just very quality writing. I know when I just reading the prologue, I'm sucked in. As I read the prologue, I was just so pulled in because you use so many captivating stories to convey the message. And I really feel like you're looking at the people that you serve in your job and the people that you meet in your daily life, because you write about homeless people. There's a woman who comes and, you have an essay about, I think it's titled, She Peed in the Pew.
That's
And,
right.
and you talk about a homeless man, and that's a very moving chapter. But I also found myself relating to all of the feelings that you convey from your position, and even those who may feel marginalized. I really feel your book is very important today more than ever, because the truth is, I think we are all being um, pushed out of the margins through the division that's being created by our media, and
Right.
even just in our social connections. And you actually have a chapter in there where you talk about how all of our community and our friending, and yet we
Yeah.
feel more and more disconnected.
Right. Yeah.
There's actually an excerpt that I asked you to read, and I'm
Yeah.
going to bring it up now simply because it's in the prologue. So as I talk about how great the
Yeah.
prologue is, would you just take a minute and read this paragraph from your prologue so we can kind of all
Sure.
get an
Yeah.
idea of how you share this message?
Thanks. Yeah, I will. I will. So I don't have it memorized, so I'm going to read it right from the book.
That would be perfect.
And let me just kind of tee this up and kind of preface it with this is at a time when I was 25 years old, and I was experiencing some pretty moderate to severe depression, and finding it very difficult to get through my days. So, but here's what you're referring to. Um, One day, while at a gas pump, I saw an older man. He would be middle aged today, but back in my 20s, he was old. As I looked over at him, he was smiling. Now, understand that during this time, I hadn't showered in weeks. Food tasted badly. Waking up each morning was a disappointment. And talking to people was just exhausting. Yet, seemingly out of nowhere, as I hung up the pump and prepared to get back into my car and drive away, it came out. "Have a nice day," I said. And like an actor on cue, the old man replied, "Have a nice life." It was it was a response that caught me off guard. Have a nice life. But I smiled back nonetheless, got into my car, and I drove off. And from that day on, in the summer of 1991, I began to heal. The fog began to lift, and the circle seemed to widen just a bit. Now, I never saw him again, but I think about this stranger from time to time. The way he looked at me, the warmth he sent me, along with those four words: have a nice life. They lasted all of 5 seconds. The impact is 27 years and running. I believe in angels.
I love that. And you know what? That is actually just a sampling of what your book is full of, because it really does have those kind of, they're almost like mic drops. I love that. It's
Mm,
lasted all this time.
yeah, 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 yeah. Very impactful, right?
Yeah. And how important it is. I think we get so busy in our lives that we don't even notice each other sometimes. And so I
Mm.
love the idea of just let's push back the circle, let's bring people in. How can we connect? How can we maybe chase away some of the sadness and the loneliness that we experience in our lives? Um, would you
Right.
like to share a little more about maybe some of the chapters and the significance of them? I know we have some pictures
Yeah,
as well
yeah,
that we can share
yeah.
that
The
come from
title of this chapter is called "Memories of My Father at the Grill." So he was a guy who would never have come on a show like this. Not, I love this. This is all wonderful stuff. But my dad was not the kind of guy who who talked about his feelings, who talked about this kind of stuff, the stuff we're talking about today. And but what he did instill in me, and what I remember vividly and succinctly about him, was that he was always, not always, but so much of the time in his life, he was looking for ways in which to help other people. And he didn't blow his horn about it. He didn't write a book. Yeah, he never. There was no YouTube back then, and none of that jazz was going on. He was always or so much of the time looking for ways in which to help other people. He was a blue collar guy. He worked at Michigan Bell. He retired at the age of 58. He went back to work. He worked at Kroger's in the produce section. Very smart man and very intelligent. Never had the chance to go to college. But if you ask people about my father, whose name is Jerry Nehr Senior, because I'm a junior, they won't talk about his job or his what kind of car he drove or what kind of house he lived in. What they'll talk about is how he helped them. He had
Mm,
a cottage up north, and there's a man who came to his funeral, drove the 5.5 hours from Rogers City down to Metro Detroit here, him and his wife, and they were in their 80s at the time. And he said that he told my mother, and it brought tears to her eyes, that your husband set the mark for being a wonderful neighbor. So my dad, whenever I went up there to see him at the cottage, because he would come back and forth between here and Detroit, but whenever he was up there, I go see him, and he was forever helping people out in some way, form, or another. No, he wouldn't give him money. He didn't have any. He wasn't a rich man at all. But he's always of assistance, always of servanthood, and so
yeah.
that's just a little bit of a sample of my memories of my father, the grill. So the grill was symbolic of, while everybody else was enjoying a party. It was my son's second birthday party. My dad was at the grill cooking, and he was there for like hours. I think he was eating at the grill, and this is his grandson's birthday party, but my dad wanted to make sure that everybody had food. So that's
Yeah.
the point. Yeah.
So speaking of your son, we'll bring up a picture of him with your yeah.
Yeah, that's my mother, right? That's so Quinn is 22 now. He may have been 5 or 6 years old here. Yeah, that's my mom, who is still alive, she's still in our lives. She's 81 years old. Her name is Sharon Nehr, and the title of this is called "Handshakes, Voices, and Hugs." So there's a picture of them hugging, and it kind of really talks about something that you had, the lead in about, our connection. So a picture of a grandson and grandmother hugging each other. Now he lives in New York, and he's an actor. He lives in Brooklyn, and so he texts us, and we talk to him on the phone. He comes and visits us, and I go there to visit him as much as I can. But
Mm,
the name of the title of the essay is "Handshakes, Voices, and Hugs," and these are all things that we have a hard time doing virtually. Now I can
mm,
see you, so I can you can hear my voice, but I can't hug you and I can't give you a handshake. And
yeah.
if we look at things like loneliness and isolation, and are we really connected? Are these people really friends, or is it something that um, we're settling for lack of a better way to say it, because we have found ways that we think we're connecting
Yeah.
online, when in fact we're not necessarily connecting. So
Yeah. We've
have a couple
lost
things.
the art of connecting really
Yeah,
in many
right, right,
ways.
right. So
Yeah.
yeah, when I probably some of my most poignant, profound moments are when I have an opportunity to be in the same room with somebody. And I hope that's the case with me and you, because I know you're in Texas. I'm here in Detroit. You still in
Yeah.
Texas, right?
Yes, I
Yeah,
am.
yeah, right, right. So maybe I'll
Yeah.
make it out there one day. We'd actually be in the same room, and But that's something
Well,
that
I think we could make
yeah,
the argument that we can connect without being in the same place, because I know through your writing and the conversations that we've had, we definitely have been able to connect on the deeper level
well,
that
no
sometimes you
question.
don't with somebody who's actually sitting right next to you. So this is another fascinating picture. Your grandfather.
Yeah, yeah. His name was Frank Nehr. He died in 1973. He was young. He was only 65 years old, and that's a picture of him. Um, he was a bodyguard. He was a tough guy, man. He was a tool and die maker, and
So who is he bodyguard for?
he was a bodyguard for a guy. My mother tells a story of a guy of a I think he was a gangster. His name was Singin'
That's
Sam back in
yeah.
Detroit back in the day. And he was his bodyguard. And my grandfather was not a big guy at all. He was maybe 5'10", 170 pounds. But from what I understand, I was just a kid, but he was not somebody to be messed with. So yeah, that's a picture of him, and that's called On Our Way Home. And I talk about his death. And one of the things he told his wife, my grandmother, was that when he died of cancer, that the angels have called me twice, and I'll be going home soon. And he died at, like I said, a young age of 65. But that's a picture of him. I don't know. Gosh, he may have been maybe his late 20s, maybe there. That
Yeah,
picture's probably
very handsome. I could definitely see he has that Italian, uh, like mafia,
yeah,
the clean cut mafia type, like, with
yeah, right,
Italian guy
right,
being a bodyguard.
yeah.
Ah, these are great. So let's ask you the next question, because I do have something I want to share, but I want to pull up the next question first.
Okay, cool.
When I say something I want to share from your book that really touched me, but to begin, I want to ask, what do you hope people will take from reading your book?
It's kind of twofold, Melanie. I guess depending on where you're at, if you're someone who's has is living a life that is healthy, and that is of I guess of you have people in your life who love you and who you love and who you care about. And so we'll call these folks that they're in the circle. They're within the margins of health and wealth, and not wealth in a financial way, could be that, but just wealthy in terms of how they live their lives. Is that if that's you, then my hope is that by reading some of these essays, and just reading the book's really short. You go through in a couple hours easy. Is to begin to think about, how can I pay attention, or how can I begin to pay closer attention to those who are not like me. There's a lot of neuroscience and social science of how we connect with other people, and most of the time we connect with people based on, do we think they're like us. All right, and that could be how we look, that could be how we believe, that could be how we behave. So invariably, though we don't necessarily want to exclude people, it's almost implicit, which means it's not recognized. It's our implicit biases are, we're not aware of them, that we can exclude people unintentionally. So I think, if I've written anything that's of substance, I hope that they can understand, they can begin to be aware that we all have this desire to be around people who are like us. But if we only do that, we miss out. We miss out on the opportunity to serve, number one, those who are not like us and who maybe could use our help. We also miss out on the opportunity to maybe learn something about those who are not like us. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, if you are outside the margins, if you are poor, if you're going through an addiction, if you have a severe and persistent mental illness, if you are unable to take care of yourself. I've had people say in my counseling practice, I got divorced, and all of a sudden I wasn't included to the parties anymore because I wasn't a couple.
Mm.
I think something like that, all the way to end stages of addiction. So, but if you are in that place in your life, is to, if you're able to get this book, how can you, from the stories, begin to have maybe some hope? One of the things about group therapy that's so critical and vital is that if we run groups well as therapists with people from whatever the population of the group is, divorced people or depression or whatever the topic is, when we see somebody healing or somebody doing well, it instills in us hope that, boy, if
Yeah.
Melanie's doing it or if Jerry's doing it, I can do it. And
Yeah.
so that's hopefully some of the things that one can take away from this, and then just learning things about themselves. Maybe there's a story that I've shared, and there's one sentence or paragraph in that hits home with someone, and now they're ignited or they're compelled to write their own story, and so yeah.
Well, uh, under this topic, I want to just share with you some of the things that really affected me, the things that I took away. So I'm gonna grab my copy of your book right here,
Okay.
and I want to share just a few paragraphs from a chapter titled "The Loneliness of the Holidays,"
Yeah.
because I really feel that we all are that person that needs to be pulled into the circle. And we might be somebody who has money or who has all the things that would qualify us to essentially be inside the margins. And yet we find ourselves feeling outside of it. And
Yeah.
the holidays, I think, is a particular time that we feel lonely, depending on what's going on in life. So, this chapter, well, all your chapters really moved me, and as I read, if you don't mind, I'm going to read some parts of it. It will let the viewers get a flavor for just how good your writing is. But in this, you're going to a park and it's about to close, and there's a very big house with a holiday party going on. But you're being allowed into the park for just a little bit before it closes. So that's just kind of the context. So it says, winding my way through the area where I usually park, I looked to my right and saw more trees and more lights on this gated property. I thought of the people who hung all those lights on all those trees, and I wondered if they were at the event that evening. Nonetheless, it looked very festive, which, for reasons that still confuse me, made me sad. Ah, how many times do we all feel a sense of melancholy at the holidays and a sadness, and we may not even be able to put our finger on it, which you couldn't exactly at that point. And
Yeah.
just the idea of wondering about all the lights and did those people get to go to the party? And I'm sure the answer probably is no. You know, the
Yeah.
people who hung all the lights would not be invited to a gated posh party. And
Yeah.
anyway, let me read a little more. So you're in this park, and then I'm gonna let you comment. You're in the park and you're eating bread. You've got some Italian bread, and it's kind of hard on the outside, a little soft on the inside. And you're throwing bread into this pond that's there. And you're right. I threw a chunk of bread that landed about 1 foot from this unknown sea creature, because you mentioned that there's, um, oh, I guess the park juts up to a great lake, and you see
Right.
something swimming in the water, and you're not sure what it is. It's really big. So
Yeah.
you said for the and you question if it might be a human swimming, but it's way too cold. And so you say, for the record, I normally don't throw pieces of food at swimmers. It
Right.
immediately jumped up and took a dive under the water, never to be seen again. If that was a human or something with arms and legs and a head my size, Darwin just moved up a notch for me. But it was more than likely some sort of water rodent. Cool. I bet the fine gents and ladies across the economic divide on the property next door wouldn't have a water rodent story to share in the morrow.
Uh,
And
yeah.
what a way to kind of the juxtaposition of this party and kind of feeling sad, even though you don't really want to be there. You're happy to be just throwing bread to the ducks. And
Right.
I just love the way that you present these feelings with not just telling us but showing us how these feelings rise up.
Oh, thank you.
So I,
Yeah.
I have a little more from this chapter. I
All right. Yeah. 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 You you
don't
you
know if you
read it.
wanted to say anything about that, but I'll keep going. All right. So this is a little farther in, and you say, I love the holidays in my thoughts. I romanticize of a Christmas where gifts are not bought and received by people who do not need them. and of where people I know are all in one place talking about incidentals and the occasional important happening in the world. Maybe a small tree with some ornaments dawns the living room and everybody brings a dish to pass, literally pass, not just set out on the table. I like it when I can pass a dish of food to someone. I like it almost as much as receiving a dish with food on it. Almost. In this Rockwellian image, people hear each other. They hug, laugh, and even cry, and there are no cell phones to terrorize the intimacy. These are my thoughts and the fantastic conjuring I do once December hits, but rarely matches fantasy. And I know that the days ahead bring about a pace that I get less comfortable with each passing year. All
Yeah.
right. And then I'm going to read a little bit more and then we can kind of talk about this. Confession. I have been to the historic estate of which I, in my holier than thou proclamations, have partook in many events over the years. So here you are looking at this event, and in the past, you've been there, you've been part of it. And
Yeah.
the truth is that even someone like me who is not looking to buy a yacht anytime soon can get into a place and enjoy some of the activities that they host. Loneliness happens to me. Maybe it happens to you too. I'd like to think it's because I have no holiday party to attend on a given night where there are lights on trees and people being catered to in their fancy clothes. But it's not that. That's too convenient. It's when I feel disconnected from others, from things, and from myself. It's when I feel that others are living better than I am. It's when I believe that I am on the outside looking in that I feel most alone. Now
Yeah.
that just summarizes, I think, the feelings that we all have from time to time. Whatever it is the drawing the circle, drawing the boundary, we
Yeah.
all are outside that boundary in one way or another. So I
Mhm.
really believe that readers are going to take from this book this feeling of wanting to connect. That's how I felt after I read. Like,
Right.
I want to reach across the pond or reach across the table or reach
Right.
across the margin and connect, truly connect with people. Of course, I think that I think that's what authors are about, really. I think we write to connect, to communicate. And
Right.
so your book is just such a powerful tool for helping people to realize maybe where their loneliness is coming from and why they feel outside and what
Yeah.
to do about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, thank you for reading those
Yeah.
stories. It's
There's a
been a
lot
while.
of reading, but I just so
Yeah.
good. So
Well, thanks. That's so thank you. Yeah, it's been a while since I heard that and read it myself, so thank you for
mm,
jogging my memory on it. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, I think if we live truthfully, loneliness is to be had.
Yeah.
I think if we're really living truthfully, because what that means is that we're um, at least I am not flitting about from one thing to the other. Um,
Mhm.
to be a part of something that maybe in my less wiser years or days, I wasn't aware that I really didn't want to be a part of it. So we can get seduced through
Mm,
social media by the fear of missing
yeah.
out, by
That is
people's
a
vacation,
good word. Wow.
and the,
That's a
and
good
the
word.
fear of look at that, look what they're doing. I mean, man, I go on Facebook and I can see all the stuff like I just had some McDonald's this evening, and so you can begin to engage in comparative thinking, and
Mhm. Yeah.
which really is a disservice to ourselves. So yeah, the whole loneliness and that juxtaposition between those who are seemingly having a lot of fun. I think it'd be interesting to poke around and some
See
of those
who's
folks.
really lonely at that
Yeah,
party. I'm
just
sure the divorced people might have some loneliness and feel outside of the
right.
couple conversations and
Well,
um,
and also too, I think we gotta be careful not to think that only those who are impoverished and going through an addiction have mental illnesses who are are the only ones who are outside the margins.
yeah.
You could have $10 million in the bank, and really and lead what seemingly looks like a healthy life, and be incredibly marginalized
Yes.
in a whole variety of ways. So our the optics aren't always don't always tell the truth about what's going on with people.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
but thanks for reading that story.
Yeah. And I think that's what's so important too, is to realize that depending on what circle is drawn, everyone is going to be outside of it. And that's part of life, but then again, what can we do about it? You know,
Mhm.
and that's, and I want to shift to my next question, because the title of your book, I think, is the answer. What do we do about it? So let me shift
Yeah,
to the next question, which
sure.
is, how did you come up with the title and the cover of your book?
Oh yeah, wow. Okay, yeah. So the title, I think in remembering my days, when I was in grad school for counseling and addiction studies and psychology of Dr. Coben telling us to widen the circle and let somebody else in, and let the person who's coming in late. Because listen, when you're late, that's a symbolic of you messed up. All right, we could look at being late to a class as if we extrapolate that to some of the other deeper and more severe ills in society. We're looking at someone who has now been doing drugs, or who has now gambled their savings away. So we can. So anyway, that was when I thought about that phrase of, hey, widen up the circle and let them in. I began to think about those who are marginalized, and that's a word. The word marginalized is used in social science and in behavioral health, a lot. And we all know what it means. It means that you've been compromised. It means that you are there are things that have either happened to you of your own will, or not your own will, but that have now put you in a place where you are unable to um, uh, lead a life that's meaningful and loving and compassionate and important. So erasing those margins was just a way to convey that let's all of us take a look at what is our responsibility to ourselves and collectively to the world in terms of how can we help those. There's things, Melanie, the people who you can help that I can't help, just by the nature of who you are and how
Mhm.
you think. I don't have those skills, and there's folks that I can help that maybe you can't. So but when the phrase of each one teach one, or each one serve one, it means that we all have, I think, um, obligation's a strong word, but maybe it's a calling, to find a way in which to serve. So that's the reason for the title. The print work, I'm not going to make anything up. I mean, you played you played a tremendous role in helping me figure all that out. So I mean, I think I give credit much to you, Melanie, for helping out with the artwork, and then whoever you got to do that. And it's wonderful. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
I
very,
love
very
I
yeah, it's
love
very
the pencil erasing literally the margin of the just this piece of paper that we're all familiar with. And
right.
and if you look up close, there's little doodles on that paper, and the doodles are very, they're childlike, but they also are meaningful. There's people hugging and holding hands,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it's just a really striking cover. I'm very proud of that cover,
Uh,
I think that you have the answer. What do we do with the margins? We erase them. Well, how do you erase them?
yeah.
Through service, like you've been saying. And I know the book ends with a really powerful chapter where you talk about a homeless man that
Yeah.
you brought a coat to, and kind of how that went. Your book is full of service in various ways. You're such a compassionate person. I think the work that you do really draws you to caring about people. It's not easy work, and I'm sure you're not making anywhere close to enough money for how much difficulty that comes with it. I know I work with marginalized people too. I work with veterans who are in
Yeah. There you
prison,
go.
and
Right.
and their neighbors, and
Right. Right. Right.
those are definitely people who are outside the margins and probably have been, the prisoners, those people most of those that were incarcerated are people who've had terrible childhoods, who have mental health illnesses. And it's just a reflection of our society that we're just pushing them out and into those kinds of institutions instead of helping them. And
No
so I
question.
think that might be another reason I'm so drawn to your book, because
Yeah,
I I also have a heart for the, those that are outside of the
I know you
circle,
do.
so to speak. So
Yeah.
yeah. So that leads me to my next question that I'd like to ask you. It's the last question
Ah,
is people who watch this show often have really important stories to share.
yeah.
Hopefully, if they don't already want to be an author, I hope that they're starting to think about it. So, what advice do you have for aspiring authors?
So I had time to think about this. This is not coming at me cold.
Oh, good. Yeah.
But I I think one should write about what bothers them. I mean, there's all kinds of ways to be inspired. But I think if you look at what bothers you or what you wish were different, and maybe start from there. What are you continually thinking about um, that um, that won't go away? Um, so I think our inspiration, which in Latin means in spirit, is when we are at that place where we are thinking and we're kind of raw about some stuff. I would suggest that when you are in a place of when you when you're having those bad days when the tears won't stop and there's a lot of psychic pain, physical pain, maybe emotional pain in your life, when you're just sad, write during those times if you can, because more than likely you're gonna conjure thoughts and feelings that are otherwise maybe more dormant and that go untapped when you're having a great day. Nothing wrong with right when you're having a great day. I've written stuff when my day is wonderful. So not to exclude your good days, but I think so. A couple things is to write about what bothers you, what do you want to change, and I kind of talk from a non-fictional perspective here, but if you're writing a play, if you're writing a fiction book, there's always things in there that people who are in conflict, and there's always ideas that need to be addressed. So that's like what's within me. I can't write about, I don't think I'll ever write a fiction a book on, you know um, I don't know, on sci-fi. That's not what's within. That's not what I have in me. What I have in me is this compassion, maybe for how to help those who are been marginalized. So that's what I wrote about. But whatever it is that stirs you up and they get you going, I think that's a place to begin.
Yeah, I agree. I think that I think we are all so valuable, all of us, our feelings, our thoughts, our lives, our experiences. The people who you write about in your book that were the ones out on the edge. I mean, if we got to know them and found out what led them to that place, it probably would be a really interesting story and probably a
Yeah,
heartbreaking story. But there's so
right.
much to be learned from our lives and our feelings and just the things that we hold dear. I agree.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice. If you're an aspiring author, where do I think it really addresses the question of where do I begin? Um,
Yeah.
and that and just say, well, what matters to you, and whether they're someone who wants to write a nonfiction or
Mm,
essays like you did, or a fiction. They might say, well, I care about homeless people, but I'm going to write a story about a homeless man that gets
right.
people to look at them differently. And so there's just
Right.
so many ways that you can just take what's inside of you, and I would say what God gave you, because
Yeah.
I work with veterans, and it's been a very delineated path, not intentional, really.
Mm,
I didn't set out to go into prisons, but I
wow.
was led there, and I
Mm,
love those people, and I'm glad that I have the opportunity to hopefully make a difference,
oh,
and that is joy, right? That's where I
yeah.
think the margins are completely erased when we're all living in a way that brings us true joy. Um,
Yeah, and if I could just right on, and also for me, it's um, coming to an awareness that I'm not so dissimilar to those other
Mm,
folks. You know,
mhm.
that they're by the grace of God, or whatever your beliefs is, science, whatever, but they're by that grace, there go I. And so
Yeah.
if we look at ourselves as separate, we will be separate. If we look at ourselves as so different, then those divisions and those margins, those walls will continue to be there.
Yeah.
But if we can connect to someone who who's not like us, but we find a way that we find something about them
Mhm.
that we can relate to. It's called empathy, but I think that's it. Um, that's maybe the message of the book. How do we how do we make that happen? So anyway, yeah,
Yeah, it's like I said, it's an extremely important book. I was telling you off camera before we started filming that I really feel like it should be a movement, that we're all involved in, which is collectively let's erase the margins. Let's erase the divide that's being put there because more and more it seems like it's not only there, it's intentionally being placed between us and
yeah,
increasing, and we're not going to none of us are going to live good lives when we allow margins and we allow divides to exist and to be
right,
built.
yeah,
And sometimes these margins are put in place, in some sort of false idea that we, I'm trying to how to put it, but when we think, oh well, it's us and them, this us and
mhm,
them idea is, I guess, what
sure,
I'm trying to convey.
yeah,
And what we need to do with this movement that I see in your title, erasing the margins, is to say no. It's all just us. We're all on
yeah,
this planet together.
right,
You and I live in the United States. We're all in the United States together.
right,
Let's help each other and not push each other away because we're different from each other. And
yeah,
I think we're all getting to the point where we want that. I hope. I like to
yeah,
think that we're all reaching a point where we're like, enough. Let's come together. How do we
yeah,
come together? And it takes thinkers and writers like you, I think, to help people just to put it into their minds, this idea that we can have sympathy or empathy with people
hmm,
that that have been out, a stranger to
right,
us, really. And so I hope to see your book be read by many more people, and for you to kind of take this torch. And I know you wrote the book to just share your feelings and thoughts, and for your son. I'm so grateful you didn't just make it only for your son, but you shared it with all of us by publishing it and putting it on Amazon. It's available on Amazon for all those that are interested. And I just think that you're doing great work. The work that you do is so needed. There's such a need for help with people who have mental illness, and there's just not enough they're stepping up. So maybe you'll inspire more people to go into that profession and that calling as well.
yeah. We need good people for sure in that
Yeah.
profession. Yes,
Yeah. Well, Jerry, thank you again. And to all of you who are watching, I hope that you'll get a copy of his book because I promise you will just eat it up. It's well written and it really does make you think and feel. And if you enjoyed this episode, please give it a thumb up because it helps us to reach more people and helps more people to learn about Jerry and his book. And if you haven't subscribed, we'd love to have you join us in future episodes. Thanks again, Jerry.
thank you, Melanie. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.